Chapter 16. The Killing of the Rakshasi Kutodari. Sutta Goswami said, after killing the Buddhists and Mlechas of Kikatapur, Lord Kalki took their wealth and returned to his capital, along with his vast army. Lord Kalki, the unlimitedly powerful protector of religious principles, next went to Chakra and took a ritualistic bath, according to the prescribed procedure. One day, as the Lord was sitting in his assembly, surrounded by Lokapals, his relatives, and his other associates, he saw some miserable-looking sages were approaching. These sages had come out of fear, and they pleaded, "O Master of the Universe, please protect us." These sages were the Balakilyas. They were very short in stature, and they were crowned with matted hair, and they wore torn cloth. Lord Hari inquired, "Where are you coming from, O great sages? Who are you afraid of?" Take 2. "Who are you afraid of? I will kill him, even if he's the lord of the demigods." When the sages heard the Lord give them this assurance, their happiness knew no bounds. The sages then narrated the story of Nikumba's daughter. The sages said, "My dear Lord, please hear our prayer. Kumbhakarna's son, Nikumba, has a daughter named Kutodari. She is so tall that she reaches halfway to the sky. Her husband's name is Kalakanja. This demonic couple has a son named Vikanja. Just now, Kutodari is lying down, breastfeeding her son, Vikanja. Her head rests on the Himalaya mountains, and her legs reach to the Nishada mountain. We have been pushed here by the force of her strong breath, and so we consider it to be the arrangement of providence that we have met you. Now, kindly save us from the wrath of this Rakshasi." After hearing this from the sages, Lord Kalki immediately left for the Himalayas, accompanied by his army. The Lord passed the first night in a valley, and as he was about to proceed the next morning, he spotted a river of milk. The river was broad and white, like a conch shell, or moon rays, and it flowed very swiftly, so that everyone became astonished when they saw it. Even though Kalki knew very well about that river, he nevertheless questioned the sages who were accompanying him. "What is the name of this river? Why is it filled with milk and not water?" The sages replied, "My dear Lord, we will disclose to you the truth of this river. This river has been created from the milk that flows from one of Kutodari's breasts. After 7 hours, another similar river will be created. After some time, this river of milk will freeze to become a sheet of white ice." Upon hearing this from the sages, Lord Kalki and his soldiers exclaimed, "Alas! How wonderful this is! A river has been created from the breast milk of a Rakshasi. This Kutodari affectionately feeds the milk from one of her breasts to her son, Vikanja. The size of that Rakshasi's body is beyond anyone's imagination. Alas, who can estimate the strength of that Rakshasi?" As they were discussing the Rakshasi in this way, Lord Kalki and his soldiers approached her. With the assistance of the great sages, Lord Kalki ascended the mountains until he finally spotted the Rakshasi with a very dark complexion sitting on the peak of the mountain, breastfeeding her son. She breathed so heavily that even wild elephants were thrown far away into the forest. Lord Kalki and his soldiers were astonished to see sleeping lions peacefully inside the cavities of her ears. Deer were sleeping in the pores of her body, along with their calves, having mistaken them to be mountain caves. They were freed from all fear of hunters, and so the deer clung to the Rakshashi's body like lice in a person's hair. Upon seeing the Rakshashi, who resembled a dark mountain, lying on a mountain peak, the lotus-eyed Lord Kalki gave assurance to his soldiers, who had become very frightened and thus lost the will to fight. Lord Kalki said, "The infantry soldiers should construct a fort on this mountain, and while remaining within, they should keep it surrounded by fire at all times. The rest of you warriors should mount your horses, elephants, and chariots and accompany me as I accomplish my mission. My strategy is that I will only take a few soldiers and challenge the Rakshashi while showering our arrows, swords, and axes." After saying this, Lord Kalki left his vast army and approached the Rakshashi while showering torrents of arrows upon her. At this, the Rakshashi began to scream with rage. Her screams were so loud that everyone's senses were stunned. What to speak of the ordinary soldiers? Even the generals felt unconscious onto the ground. Kutodari, the ferocious Rakshasi, then opened her mouth wide and swallowed all the chariots, elephants, and horses after pulling them toward her by her powerful inhalation. When a bear breathes heavily, many insects and ants are drawn into his mouth. In the same way, Lord Kalki and his soldiers were forced helplessly to enter the Rakshashi's mouth. This stunned all the demigods and Gandharvas who were watching from the heavens and made them bitterly lament. Some great sages cursed Kutodri, while others recited prayers and mantras for the welfare of Lord Kalki. Many qualified Brahmins simply watched quietly, unable to even counteract their great distress. The devotees of Lord Kalki cried out in frustration, whereas the demons shouted with glee. When Lord Kalki, the slayer of the demons, who are inclined to harass the devotees, witnessed the distress of his spectators, he could no longer tolerate it, and so he made up his mind to put an end to the Rakshasi without delay. Within the dark stomach of the Rakshasi, Lord Kalki created fire with one of his arrows, and then made it blaze up by adding cloth, leather, and wood. The Lord raised his powerful sword. Just as Indra had previously pierced the abdomen of Vritasura with his thunderbolt, so that he could come out of the demon's body, Lord Kalki, the master of the universe and destroyer of all sinful reactions, emerged from the Rakshasi's abdomen, along with his friends, brothers, and soldiers, who were all well equipped with weapons, after tearing open the right side of a rib cage. Some elephants, horses, chariots, and infantry soldiers emerged from the abdomen, while others emerged through the holes of her body. After the blood-soaked soldiers came out from the Rakshasi's body, they saw her writhing in pain, flailing her arms and legs wildly. And so they picked up their bows and began showering their arrows upon her. Thus, the Rakshasi's entire body was pierced by sharp arrows, and this created a vast pool of blood. She screamed, and her convulsions shook the mountain. In this way, her life came to an end. When the Rakshasi's son, Vikunj, witnessed the death of his mother, he became enraged and jumped into the midst of the ocean that was Lord Kalki's army. Slain elephants appeared like a garland on his chest. Horses were his ornaments. Snakes became his crown. And lions were the rings on his fingers. Being overwhelmed by grief because of his mother's death, Vikanj began to torment Lord Kalki's soldiers. To eliminate this 5-year-old Rakshasa, Lord Kalki invoked the Brahmastra that was given to him by his teacher Parashuram. That supreme weapon proceeded to sever Vikanja's head from his body. In response to the pleas of the great sages, Lord Kalki thus destroyed the formidable Rakshasi and her son on the peak of a mountain in the Himalayas. After witnessing the death of this terrible Rakshasi, the demigods showered flowers upon Lord Kalki, and the sages offered him nice prayers. Thereafter, Lord Kalki then departed. That evening, he made his camp at Haridwar on the banks of the river Ganga. Lord Kalki, the incarnation of Lord Hari, passed the night at Haridwar along with his associates and soldiers. Early the next morning, the great sages approached Lord Kalki on the pretext of bathing in the Ganga, being very eager for his darshan. As Lord Kalki and his associates were enjoying the beautiful sight of the sacred river Ganga, the great sages approached him and offered their obeisances. After doing so, the sages endeavored to please the Lord by offering him selected prayers with great devotion. Thus ends the translation of the 16th chapter of Shri Kalki Puran. Shri Radha.